By the early 1980s, motocross was at full boil. Two-strokes ruled the dirt, and every brand wanted the meanest big bore on the track. Kawasaki's KX500 was pure muscle. Yamaha's YZ465 and 490 were fire-breathing bulls. Suzuki's 465 Ringit hit hard, but none of them were easy to live with. They made heroes or sent riders to the dirt. Honda, meanwhile, had something to prove. The 81 CR480R was fast but twitchy. Its frame too soft, its manners too stiff. Riders called it polite. And in a world built on fear and fury, polite didn't win races. So Honda's engineers went back to the drawing board with one mission: build a bike that could be the fastest and the most rideable. A machine that showed brains could match brawn. In 1982, the CR480R was born. Calculated aggression on two wheels. It lasted only 2 years, but it changed everything. Why would Honda build a 480 cubic centimeter monster just to kill it 2 seasons later? They called it the CR480R. But what Honda had really built was something alive. Every inch of it pulsed with purpose. And unlike the liquid-cooled race bikes that would soon dominate the sport, this one still breathed open air. It was the last air-cooled two-stroke Honda would ever send into the 500 class before the water-cooled CR500R arrived in 1984. The choice wasn't stubbornness, it was philosophy. Air cooling kept the machine light, simple, and honest. No radiators to crack, no hoses to rip open in a crash, just metal and motion. The heat it made wasn't hidden behind plumbing. It poured through the cooling fins, down the frame, and into the rider's legs, a constant reminder that the engine was truly alive beneath you. It spoke in a deep, hoarse voice, one big piston pounding its rhythm into the dirt. The seat warmed, the frame shimmered, and the air filled with that unmistakable mix of oil smoke, dust, and sun. Push it too hard, and the motor ran hot, asking for a little mercy. You didn't simply ride a CR480R. You kept it calm, like holding a wild animal trembling with heat and fury in your hands. That raw, living heartbeat came from a single enormous lung. A 472 cubic centimeters two-stroke that didn't whisper or negotiate. It barked. It struck. It made somewhere around 52 to 54 horsepower, but the number alone didn't tell the story. What mattered was weight, just over 225 pounds dry, giving the CR480R a power-to-weight ratio close to 1 horsepower for every 4.3 pounds. On dirt, that was lunacy. Inside, a heavy crank and a forged piston slammed up and down with prehistoric force, feeding through a 5-speed gearbox built to take punishment. The clutch and gears were strengthened, not for endurance races, but for survival. And unlike the liquid-cooled bikes that came later, there was no power valve, no electronics, no smoothing of the hit. Below half throttle, it felt tame, even friendly. Cross that mark, and it detonated like a stick of dynamite. A quick flick of the wrist, a heartbeat too late on the clutch, and the rear wheel would claw for the sky. The bike didn't surge forward so much as explode. Riders learned to read terrain like scripture, because one mistake meant eating dirt hard. As one racer put it, if you slip the clutch too late, it teaches you how to fly. For newcomers, it was pure terror. For seasoned pros, it was a jolt of adrenaline they couldn't get anywhere else. That blend of danger and glory became its addiction. The CR480R didn't care if you were ready or not. It didn't ask for permission or forgiveness. It just hurled you backward and waited to see if you'd survive the landing. That kind of power needed something stronger than nerves to contain it. It needed structure. And that's where the CR480R surprised everyone. Beneath its red skin sat a single down-tube steel frame, trimmed and tighter than the one on the old CR450R. The headstock was reinforced, the rear section braced to fight flex. It wasn't fancy alloy or space-age tubing, just good American steel built with purpose. But it worked. The frame didn't twist, it talked. giving riders just enough feedback to know when the back tire was clawing for grip or starting to break loose. Up front, Honda fitted a 43mm Showa fork with long travel and refined hydraulic damping. It soaked up jumps that would have shattered lesser bikes, landing smooth without bottoming out. Out back, the magic happened through the ProLink rear suspension, a single-shock setup working through a triangular linkage that stretched every inch of suspension travel. It gave the 480R a supple yet stable feel, something the stiff KX500s and YZ490S of the day could only envy. Together, the chassis and suspension made the impossible manageable. That wild 472 cubic centimeter heart could now be aimed, not just unleashed. It let pros ride closer to the limit, hammering through corners faster, keeping the front end down when instinct said it should lift. This was the turning point for Honda's off-road philosophy. The moment they stopped selling brute strength and started selling usable speed. All that control on paper still didn't make the CR480R an easy ride. The pros knew better. You didn't just hop on one and go, you had to earn it. Even starting the thing was a gamble. One wrong kick, one lazy follow-through, and that massive piston could kick back hard enough to bruise your ankle or launch you off the peg. Riders joked that if you could start it twice in a row without limping, you'd pass the first test. It wasn't built for beginners or even weekend warriors. This was a machine for real motocross racers, men who spent more time in the air than on the ground, and for the Baja Desert riders who needed raw, relentless torque that could carry them across miles of punishing sand. To ride it well, you stood on the pegs, balanced your weight in the center of the seat, and feathered the clutch with surgeon-like precision. You had to read the earth itself, feel every rut, every patch of loose soil, and know exactly when that rear tire would hook or spin. Within the motocross community, mastering the 480R became something bigger than sport. It was a rite of passage. If you could ride one and keep it upright, you didn't need trophies or talk. The scars on your boots and the sound of that engine said enough. Because in those days, riding a CR480R without falling wasn't just skill. It was respect earned the hard way. For those who could tame it, the CR480R felt immortal. But in the fast-moving world of motocross, even legends have an expiration date. The first version hit the tracks in 1982, and by 1983, Honda had already given it a light refresh, new carburation, revised gearing, and updated graphics. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. By 1984, the 480R was replaced by an all-new machine, the liquid-cooled CR580R. The reasons were practical, not emotional. Air cooling had reached its limits. The big engine simply ran too hot too long. Water cooling promised better temperature control and more consistent power over a race. International MX rules and factory ambitions were shifting toward the new tech, and Honda needed a platform that could win championships and sell to the masses. The 500 class itself was shrinking, its brutality scaring off casual riders. So the CR480R's reign ended quietly, but not as a failure. It had done exactly what it was meant to do, prove that an air-cooled two-stroke could reach the edge of perfection before giving way to evolution. And from that proof, the CR500R was born. The end of the 480R wasn't the end of its story. It was the spark that lit something even bigger. Everything Honda learned from that short, furious experiment fed directly into the CR500R. The frame and ProLink suspension had already proven they could handle brutal torque without folding under pressure. The gearbox and driveline were refined from the 480's blueprint, built to deliver power with less shock and more precision. And the engineers finally understood what the riders had been begging for, a way to soften the hit without dulling the thrill. That became the soul of Honda's next chapter. The philosophy shifted from raw power to controllable performance. and that DNA carried through the 500R's veins. The result was devastating. A water-cooled monster that dominated AMA 500cc motocross, Baja, and desert racing for nearly 2 decades. It earned the name the King of Dirt and the respect of every rider who ever tried to hang on. If the CR500R was the nightmare we all remember, the CR480R was the dream that made it possible. And yet, even after the CR500R had ruled the dirt for years, the old 480 never faded away. Time turned it into something rarer, a relic from an age when man and machine met on raw, mechanical terms. Today, the CR480R is one of the most sought-after vintage motocross bikes in America. Restored examples trade hands for 3 or 4 times their original price, and collectors prize them not for polish, but for authenticity. The smell of fuel, the worn grips, the scars on the frame. What draws people back isn't nostalgia for Honda's logo, it's the memory of power without filters. No electronics, no sensors, no traction control, just metal, fire, and nerve. When that air-cooled engine barks to life, it fills the air with that same sharp tang of premix and dust, the unmistakable scent of the 1980s. For many, it's the smell of youth, of freedom, of a time when courage mattered more than calibration. Culturally, the 480R is motocross's muscle car, too strong to last, too pure to forget. Like those big block beasts of the 1970s, it wasn't killed by lack of love, but by regulation, by a world that decided safety and refinement should come first. You can't buy back the 1980s, but you can buy back the feeling of a machine that once tried to kill you and made you love every second of it. Maybe that's why the legend still lingers, because everyone who ever threw a leg over one remembers exactly how it felt. That snap of the throttle, that blur of red, that heartbeat of fear right before the rear tire hit dirt again. So let's hear it from you. Who here has ever been thrown off a 480 or a 500cc two-stroke that bit back harder than you expected? Do you belong to the old school camp of raw muscle or the new age of controlled power? And if you had 5 minutes on the clock, would you choose the air-cooled CR480R or the water-cooled CR500R? Stick around for the next story. CR500R, the monster it created.